Everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have Katherine Hirsh, and she has co-authored booklets for the Myers Briggs company. She has done workshops around the world around this topic, and she's one of the most well-renowned individuals with INTP preferences in the type space. And in this video, we're here to talk about what happens when INTPs are critiquing you and how you should interpret it. And you offered some really amazing insights there, so I'll pass the torch to you.
Well, thanks. And I'm very excited to be here. I've really enjoyed the videos that I have watched, and I'm so pleased to have an opportunity to join you and do one myself. So thinking about INTPs and critique. As a younger INTP, I was pretty blunt and often made suggestions that probably were helpful in theory, but completely unhelpful in practice because the way I presented them really blocked people from getting much out of what I said, because it wasn't necessarily harsh, but it also wasn't couched in terms that would make people feel like they want to do anything about it or excited that what they've got could be improved. And after a little bit more experience in the job world and learning more about type and thinking carefully about how what I really wanted was to be generous and helpful because I'd noticed something valuable, I needed to have my messaging match my intention, which was to, if I'd seen something great, to say, wow, this is really fabulous. Let's tweak a couple of things, if you don't mind, because I think we could make it even better and reach more people and have more of an impact. And in practical terms, I was a university professor for a while. I went from using a pen that had a color signal to it that didn't really fit. I wasn't using a red pen, but I went to using explicitly purple because it didn't have a meaning. And I thought, putting comments in that just highlight what is here and say, let's explore further how you could make this essay, this master's thesis, this dissertation, this conference presentation, depending on who I was working with, that little bit better. And I wasn't sure initially that this was anything very special. And then I was at a conference event and another INTP, Greg Husko, was answering questions from people about, what should they know about an INTP? And he basically said the same thing, which is if an INTP has taken the time to criticize you, that should be considered, as harsh or awful as it might feel, as a huge compliment, because most INTPs, especially those who aren't terribly mature and aren't very effective in using their preferences, just don't give a damn about other people to the extent that they critique them. If you're getting a critique, that's a sign that the person cares, because if they don't, they're not going to bother. In fact, they wouldn't really give a damn if you messed things up, if you fell on your face. That would just be another day in a world where everyone else is pretty much incompetent from the point of view of the less generous, less well-developed INTP, that is. And there were people lighting up in the room who suddenly realized, actually, the friends or maybe the acquaintances where they had felt judged, they had to take a moment and step back and say, was I looking at the way the message was presented rather than the content, and not being able to take on board that someone was so excited about what it was that I was doing, or at least interested to the extent that they gave a damn. And so they wanted to give me feedback. And maybe with a little coaching, they could be brought to a place where that feedback would even be presented in a way that was positive and affirming, and started out with the piece about how excited and engaged they were in the ideas they were hearing, or the practices, or the applications that were coming out in the conversation with this person who at the moment was thinking, who is this jerk? And why are they telling me all these things that I might need to hear, but I don't want to hear told in this kind of a way? What's just popped into my head is that when I first moved to Germany, I hadn't appreciated the fact that giving people feedback in a direct fashion was the cultural norm. Living in the United States, and where I was living immediately before coming to Germany in the South, people are not all that direct. And, bless your heart, that might mean literally that's something where I think you've done a great job, or it could be said in a sarcastic fashion. It's very difficult to tell. In Germany, what I learned was that on the spectrum of directness, rather than being at the very direct end where I thought I had been, I'm pretty much bang in the middle. There are plenty of people in Germany with a preference for feeling who will go right into the critique because culturally they want to do the best job possible. And so they want to hear the critique first. And then they can get to those parts about how great it is. But perhaps there's also a bit of extra confidence that things are already good or they weren't being discussed that leave people more comfortable. And I think sometimes people in the US are a little less confident putting out their own ideas, and so may take that directness as more of an attack than someone who's very confident and interested in digging into those details.
Yeah, I could totally see how culture really changes how direct or indirect you are. Like, you'll even meet some INTJs who grow up in that kind of indirect kind of culture you talked about, and you're like, wow, it really kind of influences type in some way as well too, because they're not as blunt as what you would picture an INTJ being, because they grew up with social norms. You to either lean into your natural preferences or to go against your natural preferences. And so you talked about how framing things in the positive is really important too, to kind of get your message across. And you even like, as we were talking, you used the example of the difference between saying, don't use the Myers-Briggs to put people into a box, which is true, but because it's framed in a negative, people don't listen to it as much. Whereas if you frame it positively, you talked about how talking about how to use type to open up opportunities and possibilities is a way that you could get people to practice type more ethically and intentionally use language so that what we intend to get across gets across without the tone or the way we say it, again, the way of the message we're trying to give to the other person.
And I think that's a huge point. And it's actually a place where trying to interact with the AI large language models has really made clear how important it can be to try and frame things in a way that I would like you to do this. Because there's nothing that needs to be stripped away. And if you forget whether it was do or do not, you still have the actual thing that you want people to do, which is open up opportunities. And I don't think anyone's going to say, yes, use the Myers-Briggs to close down opportunities or any tool. And I think the other important piece about taking that more positive or even appreciative approach is it reminds people that what they're doing right now is probably already quite good. And it's going to be a lot easier to work with our preferences, our types, our function stack, rather than work against it. So if we take, here I am with INTP preferences, I'm really good at providing a critique. How do I leverage that to make that land in a way that's going to be more effective? Well, let's think about what I can do. I can make sure that I mention, I'm very excited about your idea. It has all of these great possibilities, bringing in some of my intuition, I guess, as well there too. I can say, I want to take some time to check with you if you'd like me to give you feedback, rather than assuming, because I have such great ideas, that the other person will want to hear those, or that they even have time given the deadline that they might be facing. Or maybe what they want to hear from me is simply that this looks great. Once you've done that presentation, let's have another conversation on how I can make it even better for the next time, because right now I just have to get this done. And all of that work gets me to think about what I can do to make the gift that I have of teasing apart subtleties or finding flaws in arguments or uncovering something as perhaps unimportant as whether you consistently capitalize indicator when you're writing about the MBTI. All of those things become more interesting and approachable for people if I've started from a place of understanding they want to know what they can do. And so I need to think about what I can do to make that message land in a way that's going to support people and follow the intention that I have to try and be as generous as I can when I see something that's good, to work and make it, with that person's permission and cooperation, that much better.
Yeah, because when you ask someone, hey, would you like to hear some improvements? It's like giving them control over also a little bit of the situation too. And human beings like the ability to have consented to something. So it hits on that. And so the takeaway from this is so beautifully said from Catherine. If an INTP is critiquing you in your life, they actually think what you have on the table is good enough that they think the critique will help you even more and actually respect what you have enough to actually say their critique. Whereas if they didn't respect it at all, they wouldn't even say their critique. You offered some amazing tips for how INTPs can work with this natural tendency of noticing certain points of improvement and how they can leverage this to have better relationships with people and to also get people to listen more to their ideas. Because oftentimes it's like an INTP with a great idea, and there's that belief that Carl Jung says that INTPs believe that a good idea will sell itself. And you can even see this in organizations. INTPs will believe, oh, if I'm a good worker, then my good work should speak for itself and people should just promote me, like without me mentioning that, which usually doesn't work in the INTP's favor, where they're like, good ideas and good work should speak for itself. Usually society is more of you advocate, you speak for your own idea, and you persuade other people to believe in it. And they're like, what? I have to persuade people? I guess this is a skill I have to learn later in life.
It's funny you say that, because I was working with a man with ESTJ preferences, and he once said to me, why are you not stepping up to take credit for all of this work? I don't understand. And I said, well, I don't actually need the credit. I'm satisfied by the fact that the work is getting done and we're doing better than we were before. And he found that noble, but completely mystifying.
Mm, he's like baffling. I wonder if he's thinking, oh, to move up the career ladder, you have to let people know what you did so that like they can promote you or but it's like, oh, it's like that's not the most important thing. The purity of the idea or the purity of the work being done is the most important thing. So,
That's a
all
good
right.
way to
Yeah.
end, I think.
Cool. And so thank you so much, Catherine, for your wonderful insights. I bet it's really helpful for the INTPs watching or someone who has an INTP in their life that they're mystified of. This helps illuminate certain behaviors. Yeah, and thank you for all the great work that you do in the type community. Yeah, you're one of the famous type people that like have a really great reputation and that people really look up to. And so I'm really thankful that you're here talking on my show. So,
Thank you for inviting me, Joyce.
all right. So thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you all in the next episode.